mad at the wrong person. The reason why we haven't been able to have a conversation is because you've held me accountable and not him. So I'm confused. Like, what are you so confused about?
Oh, okay, so she said telling the truth on you, so what's the truth?
What would be your truth? Because my truth is I don't know what you're talking about.
Of course
so
you don't.
Whatever your truth would be, what is it? Like,
Of course you don't. Because you
Rasheeda has always been a representation of grace, strength, and fortitude, but even the strongest hearts have their breaking points. But even the strongest people eventually reach their breaking point. She had been through the highs and lows of her marriage to Kirk Frost for years. This time, there would be no going back through all the agony and betrayal cycles. Rasheeda had already encountered distrust and skepticism, self-doubt, rage, guilt, and eventually, abandonment. She gradually realized over the years that Kirk Frost, the guy she had previously thought she could fully trust, had crossed a line that even her love couldn't fix. Once written off as hearsay, the rumors and whispers about their marriage were now starting to feel very real. Rasheeda's worst worries came true one evening as she was sitting by herself in their house. She was looking through her phone when she saw text messages that Kirk and Jasmine Washington had exchanged. These communications were personal, honest, and devastating, not merely flirty or innocuous. They exposed a lie-hanged, treacherous side of Kirk that Rasheeda had never thought possible. Not only was the content of the texts shocking to her, but she also realized that the man she trusted so much didn't care about their marriage or her feelings. Rasheeda has battled for their relationship for years. She had balanced their children, business endeavors, and personal lives, dealing with both the good and the terrible. But she was gradually losing her strength due to the frequent betrayals. After all this time, she felt as though the foundation of their marriage was collapsing in front of her. The persistent pattern of dishonesty, the covert actions, and Kirk's total lack of respect were more painful than the affair itself. It was more than a mistake to have an affair with Jasmine Washington, the woman who had become the center of their relationship problems. Although Rasheeda was aware that Kirk had previously spent the night with Jasmine, the sight of the overt proof in front of her felt like a sobering reminder of all her fears. It seemed as though he didn't value the love and trust she had put into their relationship. Rasheeda experienced an almost intolerable sense of betrayal as the situation's reality set in. She couldn't deny that Kirk had betrayed her confidence in a way that felt unrepairable, even though she had loved him with all her heart. Knowing that the guy she had committed her heart to had been keeping a big portion of his life hidden from her was painful, and no amount of assurances or apologies could make it go away. The continuous lies, the avoidances, and the emotional distance that had developed between them over time were more painful than the affair alone. For years, Rasheeda had stood up for Kirk and tried to keep their relationship going, but it seemed like she was the only one making an effort. Every time she believed they were making progress, something would occur that would drag them back into the same cycle of disappointment and hurt. She was worn down by it, and now she was tired. She could no longer bear the thought of fighting for a relationship that appeared so damaged. Something inside of her exploded as she looked at the text messages on her phone. All of the things she had gone through over the years suddenly were too much for her to handle. She was beginning to realize that she had nothing more to give Kirk after giving so much of herself. The resentment and betrayal that had accumulated over time now overwhelmed the love she had once had for him. Rasheeda was aware that this was not fair to her. Although she had always taken great satisfaction in her strength, she also knew when to back off. This was not the relationship she had dreamed for, nor was it the life she had envisioned for herself. She knew deep down that things weren't going well, so she couldn't keep acting like they were. There was no turning back now that the truth was out. Even as it hurt, Rasheeda understood that the best way to keep herself safe was to leave Kirk. She had given him numerous opportunities, but he had failed her each time. She now had to give up the hope that things would ever return to normal. It was time to prioritize herself and stop letting his behavior dictate her future and level of happiness. She had had enough of the lies, the years of heartache, and the never-ending cycle of betrayal. Rasheeda no longer saw this as a chance to salvage her marriage or attempt to make things better than they were. It was about regaining her own life and happiness, about finding serenity. Though she knew it was the only path forward, the journey ahead would not be simple. Over the years, she had demonstrated strength not only in bearing the agony, but also in recognizing when it was time to move on and take charge of her own life. Rasheeda started to experience a sense of freedom that she hadn't had in years. As the days went by, she no longer felt the need to bear the burden of the betrayal alone, even though it still weighed heavily. One step at a time, she was regaining her authority. It would take a while to mend, but she was prepared to take on the challenge. She would eventually reconstruct herself, but the woman she had been, the woman who had loved with all her heart, was still there. Rasheeda refused to let her history, or the guy who had harmed her, define her. No matter how unclear the future appeared, she was prepared to welcome it. The tale of Rasheeda serves as a reminder that even the most resilient people have their limitations. Letting go is sometimes the most difficult thing to do, yet it's frequently the only path to the contentment and tranquility we are entitled to. Rasheeda was finally prepared to take the first step toward a fresh start, even though her path wasn't simple. She silently begged for forgiveness for every error she had done while standing in front of the mirror and gazing at her image. She used to find it impossible to envision her life without Kirk. She had had faith in their future together, in him, and in their love. However, the burden of his falsehoods was now too great to bear. The trust that had served as the cornerstone of their relationship had irreparably collapsed. But the love she had once felt for him had not abruptly disappeared. Rasheeda honored the promises they had made to one another in spite of the emotional upheaval she was experiencing. She recognized the value of commitment, loyalty, and marriage. These served as the cornerstones of each solid partnership. But every day, she came to the conviction that she couldn't continue to fight for something Kirk wasn't prepared to fight for himself. She had offered him innumerable opportunities to turn his life around, to show that he loved her as much as she loved him, and to make amends. But every time, her dreams had been shattered. Their former affection has changed into something else entirely. Rasheeda was aware that she would have to make a difficult choice. She made the heartbreaking decision to stop fighting for a marriage that appeared doomed the next morning. She had made numerous attempts, but it was now obvious that she couldn't prevail in this war by herself. She had to let go as much as she wanted to. She couldn't wait for Kirk to recognize the harm he had caused. He was not going to change. Later that day, Kirk discovered an empty room where Rasheeda's possessions had been. The sounds of their shared lives had previously filled the house, but now it was disturbingly quiet. With a sorrowful heart but a strong resolve, Rasheeda had packed away her belongings. She was aware that this was the first step to regaining her tranquility. She could no longer cling to the life they had formerly had together, or the dreams they had created together. She knew deep down that this was the only way to go forward, even though it seemed like a piece of her universe had fallen apart. Rasheeda had hoped for so long that things would improve, that Kirk would change and at last prioritize her needs over his own. Always thinking that things would get better in due time, she had given him more opportunities than she should have. However, as she gathered her belongings, she came to the realization that she couldn't continue to be in a relationship that was just causing her pain. She was taking back her life, her honor, and her future, not simply leaving Kirk. For once, she needed to prioritize herself after spending so much of herself on him and their marriage. It was more than simply a relationship breakup when I left Kirk. Beyond the role of the woman behind the man, it was about rediscovering who she was, who she had always been. Rasheeda's relationship with Kirk, their shared existence, and their past love had defined her for a very long time. She was now learning how to identify herself according to her own standards. She had to reclaim the aspects of herself that she had lost during the voyage of self-discovery. She had lost who she was before Kirk, a woman with goals and desires of her own, since she had been so preoccupied with attempting to mend their broken marriage. As a person, and not merely in a relationship, Rasheeda deserved to be content and happy. She was prepared to accept that reality today.